There were dozens of incredible product introductions by Steve Jobs while he was CEO of Apple, like pulling the iPod Nano out of his jean coin pocket or sliding the MacBook Air out of a manila envelope. But perhaps the most iconic product keynote he ever delivered was for the original iPhone back in 2007. Not only did the presentation feature an incredible narrative and setup for the iPhone's reveal, but it was a logistical nightmare to pull off, and some people who worked on the introduction didn't think it could be done successfully at all. So in this video, we're going to take a peek behind the curtain and investigate the drama behind the original iPhone's launch and find out why it's considered by many to be one of the greatest product introductions of all time. This is Greg with Apple Explained, and I want to thank Brilliant for sponsoring this video. If you want to help decide which topics I cover, make sure you're subscribed, and these voting polls will show up in your mobile activity feed. Now, if you were around to watch Steve Jobs reveal the original iPhone, you probably remember how incredible his presentation was. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend taking a look. Jobs had an incredible amount of charisma on stage that was referred to as the reality distortion field. In fact, one of the top comments on the iPhone's introduction video is, "Steve Jobs and the power of persuasion. I'm convinced I need to buy an iPhone 2007 right now in 2019. So you can only imagine how excited people were about the iPhone back when it was introduced for the first time. But if you're not familiar with tech product keynotes, you may have a hard time understanding why the original iPhone's introduction was so special. So let's start off by putting the entire event in perspective. When tech companies like Apple, Microsoft, or Google want to reveal a new product, they typically hold an event inside of an auditorium or theater and invite the media, software developers, and even students. It's a really effective way to generate excitement and hype for a new product, which in turn gives the company a lot of free press. Products are then revealed on stage, and usually visitors get to demo the new products after the keynote, although this isn't always the case. So that's the idea behind these product introductions, and Steve Jobs was known to deliver the best presentations in the business. Typically, companies don't give live demos of new products or services on stage after being revealed, and there are a few reasons for this. Live demos require a lot of extra preparation, it's not uncommon for things to go wrong, and the product or service may not be fully developed yet, which only increases the likelihood of it malfunctioning in front of the audience. So many companies just explain how their new product works and leave out the live demo. But Jobs did things a little differently. He insisted on having live demos for major product introductions, and the original iPhone was no exception. Although there were a few problems. The iPhone wouldn't go on sale for another 6 months, so the product was still being developed and therefore it was riddled with bugs. The software hadn't been optimized for the iPhone's hardware, which meant apps would crash once the device ran out of memory. Apps would also crash if tasks were done in a certain order. If you used Safari and then the Mail app, the phone would crash. But if you reversed those actions, things would be just fine. There was also a hardware issue, since only about 100 iPhones even existed at that point, since the product hadn't even entered production yet. Wireless connectivity also posed a huge challenge for Apple. There would be 5,000 people in the audience, many with their own wireless networks which could interfere with the iPhone. You also have to keep in mind that Apple needed their network to be hidden and secure to prevent audience members from hacking into the signal. And when it came to cellular connection, things got even more challenging, since the iPhone's radio software was extremely buggy and crashed frequently, which means the device would lose connection to the network and the call would drop. And if all that wasn't enough, Jobs wanted the demo iPhone's displays to be mirrored on the big screen, which was actually a lot harder than it may appear. Now, typically if a company wants their product to be shown on a big screen, they just set up a live camera feed. But that wasn't good enough for Jobs. He wanted the audience to feel like they were holding the phone in their hands while watching the demo. So you can see how much of a challenge it is to pull off a successful live demo, and why most companies shy away from it. But how exactly did Apple overcome all these obstacles? Well, to deal with the iPhone's buggy software, they included multiple demo units on stage. That way Jobs could switch between them before they crashed. Engineers also had to painstakingly test hundreds of different demo paths to find the one that had the smallest chance of crashing. That's why you see Jobs flipping through a booklet on stage. It guided him through what was called the golden path. That way he knew which apps to open when and minimize the chance of failure. Apple also had to change the software that powered their airport wireless base station to allow it to run on a Japanese frequency that wasn't permitted in the US. This prevented audience members from locating the signal and possibly hacking it. And when it came to keeping the iPhone connected to its cellular network, Apple actually had Singular, now AT&T, bring in a portable cell tower to ensure a strong reception. But there was also the issue with the iPhone's buggy radio software. So in order to prevent the audience from noticing when the radio would crash and restart, Apple hard-coded the phone to always show 5 bars, regardless of the actual signal strength or radio status. And when it came to mirroring the iPhone's display, Apple engineers spent weeks adding the extra circuit boards, video cables, and software necessary to flawlessly mirror everything on the iPhone. Now, during practice runs before the big day, Jobs was only able to get through the entire presentation smoothly a few times. So when it came time to deliver the actual keynote, Apple's managers and engineers were extremely nervous. They actually brought flasks of whiskey and took a shot after each successful segment of the demo. And once Jobs made it through the entire presentation without a problem, the iPhone team went out and spent the rest of the day drinking. And it's easy to see why what they'd accomplished was practically a miracle. Not only was development of the iPhone a grueling process, but execution of its introduction and live demo took things to a whole nother level. And it's important to point out the effect it had on the entire industry. The iPhone represented the biggest technological leap ever in the mobile phone market, and I'm not sure if we'll see anything like it again. The fact that its technology is more comparable to today's smartphones rather than the Blackberries and Palm Treos of its time is a true testament to how revolutionary the iPhone was. And you can imagine how other companies were feeling when the device was introduced. Google engineer Chris DeSalvo said, "As a consumer, I was blown away. I wanted one immediately. But as a Google engineer, I thought, we're going to have to start over." And that's exactly what several companies had to do after they saw the iPhone. But there was one company in particular that wasn't too bothered by the new smartphone, RIM. And if you're wondering why you've never heard of them before, it's because they became irrelevant not long after saying this about the iPhone: "We'll be fine. It has rapid battery drain and a lousy digital keyboard." So RIM continued to make their BlackBerry smartphone as usual, with a fixed plastic keyboard, small low-quality display, and clumsy control buttons. And as you may have expected, sales of the BlackBerry sharply declined. RIM eventually changed their name to BlackBerry Limited and began focusing on selling security software to governments and corporations rather than selling smartphones to consumers. Microsoft CEO at the time, Steve Ballmer, had a similar reaction to the iPhone's introduction.
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine. Now, it may sell very well or not. We have our strategy. We've got great Windows mobile devices in the market today. You can get a Motorola Q phone now for $99. It's a very capable machine. It'll do music. It'll do internet. It'll do email. It'll do instant messaging. So I kind of look at that and I say, well, I like our strategy. I like it a lot.
And while he liked Microsoft's smartphone strategy, it was clear customers did not. Eventually, Microsoft discontinued their Windows Phone OS and exited the smartphone market altogether. So when you take a step back and look at how quickly the mobile phone industry has changed since the iPhone's introduction, you begin to recognize that the companies who took the device seriously, like Google, ended up at the forefront of the industry, while those who dismissed the product, like RIM and Microsoft, were swept away by the new wave of technology that consumers ended up preferring, even if that wasn't clear at the start. Because executives weren't the only people who stuck their nose up at the original iPhone. A huge number of people thought the iPhone was a bad idea. Just take a look at these comments from 2007. "Apparently none of you guys realize how bad of an idea a touchscreen is on a phone. I foresee some pretty obvious and pretty major problems here. I'll be keeping my Samsung A707, thanks. It's smaller, it's got a protected screen, and it's got proper buttons. And it's got all the same features otherwise. Oh, but it doesn't run a bloatware OS that was never designed for a phone." I'm not impressed with the iPhone. As a PDA user and a Windows mobile user, this thing has nothing on my phone. It sure is good at what it was designed for, a phone that entertains and talks. Other than that, I don't see much potential. How the heck am I supposed to put appointments on the phone with no stylus or keyboard? Now, looking back today, these comments almost sound satirical, but it's great evidence that no matter how incredible a new product may be, change will always upset some people. After all, the people who made those comments hadn't even used the iPhone yet, and I'm willing to bet all of them own a smartphone with a touchscreen today. So the effect of the iPhone and its introduction is immeasurable. Its influence even spilled over into other industries and continues to shape the way we use technology today. Now, I have a quick logic question for you. Out of these four figures, which one can be folded up to make a cube? Take a moment to think about it and really visualize trying to fold them up. If you figure out the answer, leave it in the comments. This is a question from one of Brilliant.org's daily challenges, which provide a quick and fascinating view into math, logic, science, engineering, or computer science. If you like the concept and want to learn more, Brilliant offers full interactive courses related to each daily challenge, so you can actually find more logic and reasoning puzzles similar to the Cube Daily Challenge we started off with. And as you make your way through a course, you'll develop skills like pattern recognition and logical reasoning while actually having fun. Brilliant does an incredible job at teaching advanced subjects in a way that people like you and me can actually understand by breaking them down into their fundamental principles. So if you want to learn how to use probability to decide when to stop gambling, determine whether you'd weigh more in Helsinki or Mexico City, or calculate the chance of rain by watching the clouds, you can get started with Brilliant for free at brilliant.org/AppleExplained, and the first 200 people who use that link will get 20% off their annual premium subscription. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.